log on anonymously. It's actually very important. Log on will actually authenticate your username and password against the CRS server and actually make a connection to the CRS server. That way you can browse prompts, scripts, things like that that are actually on the repository. If you log on anonymously, what you cannot do is you cannot upload a script directly to the repository on the CRS server, which you do have the capability to do, and I'll actually show you that. So what that means is if you log on, you can actually create the script and then upload it via the editor directly to the script repository. If you're in anonymous mode, think of anonymous mode as almost like offline mode. You won't have the ability to do that. You're working offline from the server. You'll have to save your scripts locally and then upload them to the server once you have connection. If you're a consultant like me, it may not be a bad thing. You can actually work in an airplane, on a train, whatever, and then upload the scripts when you're done. The other big con to this is if you log on anonymously, you cannot run a reactive debug. And we'll talk about reactive debugs probably in the next module or the next blog where I actually show you guys how to run a reactive debug. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to log into the server. Hopefully I got the right username and password. What you're going to notice is it's trying to make a connection to the server. What I'll tell you is if you do see that hang right there where it actually initializes the connection and you see it hang and it won't get past maybe 50% or so, what you can do is go ahead and kill the process on the Windows machine and then relaunch it. I've seen that happen before in the past. Usually it's some sort of network problem, maybe some delay between where you are and where the server is. The Java runtime environment that's installed on your laptop is also a big key there. If you actually upgrade your JRE to the wrong version, let's say you do a Windows update or you actually right click down in the system, try to update your Java version, that might break the editor. So be very cognizant of what you do with Java with this, because everything inside the editor is Java in the background. Once the editor opens up, I'm going to show you guys the 4 panes here. We essentially have 4 different panels inside the editor. What I want to show you here over on the left, and I'll actually expand these out, everything over here is what they call the palette window. If you didn't know, these are actually Java beans, and you guys can Google that. Java beans are essentially some basic code that you can write in Java, but what this does is let us actually drag these beans over to the design window, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is where we're actually going to create our scripts and how we're going to create the call flow. Down here in the bottom left, what we have is actually the variables pane or the variables window. I'll show you guys what that is in a second, but the variables window is essentially where we'll create variables that our script will use. And then over in the right, we actually have the messages window. The messages window is where we can actually run debugs on our script. When we go to validate our scripts, which is a very important thing that I'll talk about in a second, the validate window will tell us if we have any errors, any logic that won't work. Up at the top, we have a basic menu bar, which I'll try to cover in a minute. We can also create a new script by going to File and New, or we can open an old one, or we could just click on the white paper. It's very similar to Word. And you'll notice once you create a new script, we'll go ahead and maximize this. This is kind of new to CRS version 5 and 7, is that it actually creates, and actually 4 as well, it creates a new script called script1.aef or script2. If you already have a script1 open, it'll just increment the number with a start and an end step. Think of this as alpha and omega. Every script has to have the start and the end step. And you can actually go under the general tab here and you'll actually see that. And then what you'll also notice is once you create the new script, down here in the bottom you can actually create variables inside the variable pane by clicking on the new variable button, which I'll cover this in a second. And then over in the right hand bottom piece of the screen we actually see that there's nothing in the messages window right now. What I kind of want to go over though is some things that I recommend to tailor or to tweak on this that'll make your scripting a lot easier on you. First thing that I usually do is to move up right off the bat. I usually try to move up using the divider bar here, the variables pane, so I have a little bit more real estate that I can see the variables that are going on. And by default, for whatever reason, the message window here is all very maximized. What I usually do is try to slide this over to the right. You don't really need this pane open unless you're going to be doing a whole lot of debugging or a whole lot of validation. This is more valuable for you to be able to see the variables pane than anything. There are some things that you would probably need to know to do to make your scripting a little bit easier on you. Best thing I can tell you to do right now is to click on settings and go to options right off the bat. What this can let you do here underneath options is actually define what colors you want to show up on the editor pane. So we can actually, for any annotations, which I'll cover later, we can actually define the color that we want it to show up in the pane. Think of it as color coordinating or color coding your scripts. We can change the color for labels. We can change whether it shows up in italic or bold. It basically is going to affect how you visually see your scripts. I usually don't mess with this. I usually take the defaults. What I do absolutely do is underneath the General tab, I always check the box that says double click to open customizers. I will cover that in a second and show you guys why that's important. And then one of the other things that's very important is if you click over on palettes, we can synchronize the licenses with the server, and I always recommend clicking that to make sure that you are actually using whatever steps your server is licensed to use. A good example for this is you guys that only have standard licensing, you don't have access to all the advanced IVR features. For example, you don't have access to anything underneath database, so you would not be using any of the steps that are inside the database group here. If you do create a script with the database steps, it will actually let you create the script inside the editor, and it'll actually validate, but when you upload it to the server during runtime, it'll throw a license exception, meaning your script won't work. So what you can do, if you just want to play around with this, you can actually uncheck a bunch of these, click on synchronize licenses, and what it does is it goes out to the server and actually checks your licenses or what you're allowed to run, and it'll actually enable the different folders here that you can use inside the palette window. And once I'm done with that, I usually click OK. And what I wanted to show you guys with the double click to customizers here is if you take, for example, any of the steps that are over here in the palette